Hi everybody. I want to talk about why I wait for a few other things to happen here. One of the game concepts I'm planning on working on. I know I've mentioned a few times about games we are designing, games we have been attempting to mess with, and a few other things. And I'm not sure a lot of you have been catching on to that, or even caring when it comes to various things, because after all, most people come to my YouTube channel for the modding of Minecraft. But I do plan to get into game development and kind of stick with it for a while. I'm not going to abandon modding. After all, it's a really fun thing to toy around with, being able to make a mod for a game you enjoy. But the ideal is to make games in order to support my ability to continue to make mods. After all, it's not free to do this stuff, and I kind of want to, well, not just do it for the money, but I actually do want to explore a lot of these concepts. The game I'm going to be talking about today is Tank Tower Defense, but we do have other games. There's several tank games we have tried to make. This tank game is actually meant to be a Martian game. You're going to be on Mars. It's going to have like a historical type of thing going on where it's in the future so many years, but Earth tries to invade Mars, etc., etc. The Hunter Tank, the arcade game. Chapter Tabletop is that tabletop game I've been talking about that's top down and stuff. We're still working on that. That was being developed. I'm waiting on some maps to be made for it before we progress even further because I'm struggling a little bit with designing and building the engine for it. And I want to have a little bit more solid data to work off of before I spend a huge amount of time defining the map generator and everything else. A few of these other ones are different things. A Korean tank game is actually part of the same universe as the Shadow Chapter one. It's another tank game we were working on. You can see the theme here. We really like tank games. Junk Box, I don't even remember what this even is. Judging by it, it's another tank game. The theme continues. But I just came up with this concept over the last couple days, and I'm really liking the ideal of it. And it was inspired by watching Unity tutorials. I was browsing through YouTube, watching AI stuff, doing various things, and I started to think of the possibility of making a game in Unity again. After all, there seems to be a much better, solid multiplayer framework. One of the reasons I actually have not made a game in Unity at the moment is because every time I went to go deal with the multiplayer side of the game, I couldn't quite figure out what was going on and how to do it. And the examples that all implemented multiplayer wanted you to pay for this expensive lobby service that was it's like 100 players would cost you like $200 a month. So it didn't seem realistic to have a huge amount of down payment in order to have a lobby system. But the new version of Unity does not have that. It has a built-in multiplayer support with a simplistic LAN system. Of course, we'll still have to make a matchmaking server for everyone to have it, where you have like a server list you browse through and stuff. But that can be handled. I'm pretty sure if I get it all working, I'm just going to go to Atlas and go, hey, can I rent a dedicated from you guys and put a matchmaking server on it and stuff, and probably pay with that with Kickstarter or just get it for free. I really like the idea of probably presenting it to Atlas where they can be one of the primary sources of where you can rent yourself servers for the game. Although it's gonna be such a simplistic game that I doubt people will rent servers for it. So it'll just be we'll pay for a matchmaking server at some point. So the design of the game is pretty low tech, and it's intentionally designed that way because I want to make a simple game that won't take too much effort. And when I was watching these tutorials, I'm trying to think of like what kind of game could I make that I could learn how to use Unity, build through a few different things, make something I would enjoy. A lot of concepts came up. One of the things I was looking at the concept was a platforming 3D platformer with a little robot, kind of like Wall-E, where you could grapple around and move and do stuff. I was like, that's kind of cool, but I don't play platformers, so I would not be able to design proper levels, and nobody I know plays platformers, so we would end up with really shitty levels. Is what my thought was. But one thing I do know is I play tank games extensively. I play Mech Warrior a lot. This is one of the original ideals why we got into this ideal. Is one of the mech games I play is Iron Brigade, which is a tower defense game where you play this mech called a trench. There's various different body types you can go through. You can equip weapons and do different things. I was inspired by that because that game is actually enjoyable, though I see a few flaws with its overall design and theme and stuff. So I was like, you know what, I can make a better game. And I was thinking, we could do mechs, but we don't have an animator. So let's, instead of doing mechs, we'll do tanks. Tanks are probably one of the more simplistic things you can make inside of a game because you don't have to animate a lot. The only thing that ever needs to be animated is maybe some idle animation, a little bit of movement animation. Both of those are really easy to take care of, and not a lot of work is required to do this. And for the prototype versions, we don't even have to worry about that. All we got to do is throw a box down, throw a box on top of that box, make a box come out of the box, and there we go. We got a tank with a turret and a cannon. And the very early versions of a few of the other tank games I actually made, that is literally what the tanks look like. Let's see if I can actually find one of those. So I believe the tank game, one of our actual tanks, yeah, right here, you can see them through the SketchUp files. They're really basic. These are prototype tanks I asked Morton to make. I'm like, here, can you sketch up a really simple tank for me to use that has a pivoting turret for the pitch, has a yaw, and has a body to it? The plan was to use this as a hover tank, of course. The original tank games, we were planning on having entirely propulsion-based technology for everything, and that was to avoid the need to do track animation and stuff. With the tower defense thing, we're probably going to do really simplistic track animation. They're not going to be high detail. As we go, we'll probably get them better and better as we implement things. But back to the actual thing. So this will be a tower defense game. You will play as a tank. It's a little weird when you think of tower defense games. Most people think of playing them as that God mode camera view where you just kind of place turrets and stuff. But there are some classes of tower defense game where you can move around and place things. Iron Brigade, of course, is one of them. You also have... let me pull my Steam library up. I actually own quite a few tower defense games. I probably under arcade. Nope. Actually, hold on. If we go to all games, and yeah, I legitimately do have 300 games. It's ridiculous, and this is even all of them. I have a whole bunch sitting on Humble Bumble that I haven't installed yet. So let's see if I can find them. And for those of you who want to ask how I got so many games, one, I've had a Steam account since like 2008, and then on top of that, Humble Bumble is magical for getting games. So there should be somewhere in here. Yeah, so Sanctum 1 and 2. These are two examples of a shooter-based game that has tower defense-based. I actually like these games. I can find it a little tedious because the first-person shooter capability of it is not very good. I hope to address that in my game. I want to make the player character more of the central focus for the tower defense type nature. So I want it to be more combat based. This is why you have 3 different classes of tank and you have 3 different class specializations. The plan is to have a whole bunch of different chassis, but the very early versions we're going to stick with probably 3 to 4 chassis. And they're all going to be Russian themed. After all, I got a nice inspiration folder here, most of you probably spotted, and I've already went and downloaded pictures of Russian tanks. And there is actually a couple in particular that I'm thinking about using. The T-20 right here, I'm thinking about using for the engineer support tank. It'll be a light tank. I'm thinking about grabbing one of these for a damage dealer. Probably a T-34 style tank for a chassis. And then, of course, our heavy tank is definitely going to be a KV-2 or a KV-1. It might even be this guy. I love this guy. You can get him in... I used to be able to get him in World Tanks in the beta. I think I got rid of him and replaced him with a T-28, which is basically what it is. It is a T-28 chassis, but then doesn't have that frontal turret. Do they even have the T-28 in this picture? There are a lot of tanks that are actually missing from this. We'll probably get some Su-34. What we'll probably do is we'll come through here and we'll get different things. As the story, at least the current lore that I've thought through, which you can read here, it's an alternative timeline between World War I and World War II, in which Germany technically lost World War I, but they didn't lose it as bad as they did the first time. Instead, they surrendered pretty early and actually got a fair deal where they didn't get completely molested by... I think it was with the Versailles Treaty. This allowed them to exist again, and they went through peaceful, and of course they got their ambitions to conquer the world again somewhere after that, creating a different version of World War II. This version doesn't have Hitler, it doesn't have all the Nazis and stuff. That kind of makes it a little bit more tame, in my opinion, to work with. I'm probably not even going to call it World War II. It's probably just going to be called some other kind of war. And that way, I don't have to deal with all of the crap that comes out of making World War II games. And dealing with a lot of the historical correctness. This is one of the reasons I want to do an alternative, is I don't have to deal with historical correctness. And it lets me have a lot more fun. The plan is to be somewhere between the 1940s and 1950s. And what happens is the Germans conquer some country. We haven't determined what country it's going to be, probably Switzerland or something. They capture some scientists who are working on robotics in the 50s. The timeline, of course, is going to be accelerated, as I plan to maybe make this a prelude into another game down the road. If you guys have seen Space Truckers, which was a game made by Maxwell, that is an asset flip, by the way. Don't buy that game. It's horrible. he had a storyline which in the Cold War never stopped, and it accelerated to the point where there was a huge space race, not this little small one where we went to the moon, where both nations kept going further and further. They made it all the way out to Pluto, got jump drive technology and everything else. And I want to make a story similar to that. So I'm thinking of taking and using this was the starting point to explain the divergent point of like what happened in our history to lead to this timeline. And this would be the example of where these scientists end up getting captured and they work on robotics and AIs and this stuff. And they build robots for the Germans to fight with. And it goes well for a couple years, and they doing everything else. Then they develop an intelligent AI robot. There's a movie I believe called like Nine that has something like this in it. No, it's not. It's the one with the little puppet characters in it. I try to remember the name of it, but I got some kind of inspiration of that. I'm like, you know what? It would be kind of cool to have this commander style robot in here that does the bad actions. It won't be the Germans that actually end up doing the bad things. The one that avoids the whole crap with World War II where everybody sees the Germans as the bad guys in every single situation. So anytime you make a game that has Germany there, you can never make them the good guys. And although I don't plan to make them the good guys in this game, I do want the player to be able to play as the German nation in here, so they get the German style tanks and stuff like the Panzers and the 88s and stuff like that. So I give my players a higher possibility of different vehicles that they can pick and play with. If you stick to one side versus the other, you limit your possibilities, of course. But yeah, so they get the commander guy. He kills like the German leadership takes over. Cold logic. He starts killing the German people. So the Germans end up becoming allies with the Allies, of course. This gives you basically 4 to 5 nations to play with. Each of them will have different tanks. I'm going to start with Russia first because I really do like Russian-style tanks. How it probably will go Russia, Britain, then the U.S., probably some Canadian tanks, which I'll merge right in with the British tanks. And they're going to not be themed after whatever I decide to make. So they're not going to be entirely World War II classified in the design. So I know we've got different pictures here. We got basically different tanks we're going to play with. But it's going to be me and Grogger and maybe more modeling these. So we're not going to get historically accurate tanks. And I don't want historically accurate tanks. I want things that look like they're from that era, but have their own personality to them, their own kind of little history, their own storyline, like different manufacturers making different tanks. Because if World War II didn't really happen and we're now in the 50s, you're going to have better technology, but at the same time not quite as advanced technology. And here's that T-28 I was looking for, by the way. So you're going to have a little bit of different variety. You might have some more better guidance systems on your tanks. I'm definitely going to have missiles. I'm going to have death rays, lightning guns. I actually have a notebook over here where I was detailing down all the weapons I want to use. Various other things. Beyond the tanks, by the way, the levels are going to be pretty simplistic. I actually grabbed this from a tutorial video that I plan to go through to see how they recommend you make a tower defense game. The plan is to have these low height maps, not very tall. We're going to have a lot of detail in them, of course. We're going to have trees, buildings, rocks, stuff like that. And you're going to be fighting through them, of course. There's going to be multiple lanes, different paths, kind of little cool little things we can do. But it's all going to be really basic low-level stuff. So that way, even though it looks like there's a lot of detail going on, it will be really easy for us to fabricate and construct. The low height is also to play advantage into the camera style. There's going to be 3 camera styles. There's going to be the first-person camera. This, of course, is going to be used primarily by the DPS dealers who just want to kind of beat the crap out of the enemy. But there's going to be a third person over the shoulder set where you get that nice top-down third person you use in games like World of Tanks, Armored Warfare, and Mech Warrior. But then on top of that, there's going to be this view here where you see this nice, really high-up third-person overview camera that gives you a better feel of what's going on. That's primarily going to be used by the support class, the people who build the turrets and need to see how the area is flowing. And of course, the leader class. If I open this back up, there's support, damage, and leader. I'm probably going to come up with more classes. Probably going to be like an assassin style class that can cloak and attack with stuff. I want to put a tank in here, so like not like a tank, but like, you know, the person who can absorb a lot of damage and take a beating. But I haven't found a valid reason to have that in there. I might put it in there and just make it like one of those underwhelming classes that nobody uses, just because I know somebody who want to try it and they might find a way to make it usable. There's going to be tons and tons of weapons. I'm actually considering, if we go down all the way down here, of making AI evolutionary weapons. I was watching a video where they were talking about a game made by this research group that they used an evolutionary style mechanic to populate the game with weapons. So you know how like Borderlands has those procedurally generated weapons? Now imagine procedural, but then there's an AI controlling the procedural. And the way this AI worked is it would look at the 3 weapons that the character was using in the, because there's a little space arcade game, I can't remember the name of it. But it would look at the 3 weapons they were using and how they would use them, and it would evolve weapons to match that playstyle. So that way the player got weapons that would be better but diversified and would match the way the player wanted to play. So they weren't getting crap that they weren't going to use. And that's a big problem with Borderlands, is that it never really gave you weapons you want to use. I know this from personal experience too, is I used to play the Gunslinger, and my favorite weapon was this mortar machine gun you got that it fired extremely low velocity but high explosive rounds that you had to literally aim into the air in order to hit anything with them. But it fired them at such a high rate, and with the AoE, you could just vomit the entire area with fire. I love that gun. You only got it once in the campaign though, and it was part of a reward for a mission. I was like, you know what? I wish the game would give me one of those. And it never did, and that was a really cool little toy weapon you could play with it. And I felt like Borderlands should have had a lot more of those. So that's the reason why I'm thinking about doing the same thing. It might be something that will come way later in development. So the very first early versions of the game are definitely going to have a solid list of weapons to play with, and they're not going to be much diversified. The way you also get the weapons, by the way, you're not going to get like unlocked chest or something like Battlefield. There's going to be very little out-of-game data stored on this. It's going to be mostly in-game. So you join a lobby with a loadout. The loadout will be what tank you want to play, what class you want to play, maybe some paint for your mech, or paint for your tank. I might actually add mechs to this game later when I'm doing things. I don't know. I might keep it tanks because I know when you try to change things up, you kind of ruin the gameplay. But yeah, so you join a game, you don't really get to pick a lot. You may get to pick your weapon type, but it'll be like really basic. Then once you get in game, you can level up your weapons and everything, and they'll be very similar to the turrets here. So if you've seen the turrets as I was passing by, here's the upgrade mechanism we're thinking of. There's going to be 3 upgrade trees per turret, and plus an AI configuration. So you'll be able to pick your firepower tree. So you'll pick, do I want a single machine gun, double machine gun, quad, and oct? What kind of weapons do I want? Do I want a 50 cal, 20 millimeter, 40? And of course, with these sizes, by the way, they're going to cut off certain things on the firepower tree. Like, I'm not going to let you have an oct 40 millimeter because making a model for that's going to be hard. But I could do a quad. A quad would be acceptable. Same with a 20 millimeter, it would be like quad limited. So like the only thing you could actually get the oct for would be the heavy machine gun and the normal machine, which would be 308. These will primarily be anti-infantry, which there is going to be infantry. The ideal behind the infantry, if I can find the bots down here, is you'll have these little walker type robots, or these little small little guys that are easy to kill. After all, you gotta think they made robots for the Germans to fight with, but they're not sophisticated, they're not high tech. You're going to be a lot of low tech, really brutal, industrial kind of looking machines. Think of a drill press with a gun. That's what I'm kind of thinking of for a lot of these robots. Tanks are literally just going to be tanks with a little bit of robotics. You'll see cables on the outside of them. You'll see like maybe robotic eyes, different type of mechanics to them. They're going to have the same type of weapons you're going to have. They won't shoot you all the time. And there will be melee, so there will be melee-style tanks. You will be able to get melee weapons as well. So if you want to play, actually, you know what? That'll make the tank class work really well if I make it highly specific on melee weapons. So you can run in with like blades spinning around and hitting all the enemies and stuff, and having that high HP, high armor resistance capability would play into your benefit because you're going to get the crap kicked out of you with stuff. It would be kind of nice. So we got some tower side. This is only a couple examples of tower side. Machine gun, cannon, sniper. There's going to be missile packs, lasers, death rays, lightning guns, Tesla towers. We'll pretty much add towers as we can think about them. There's going to be traps. Traps are basically towers, though. So there'll be a mine deployer. There'll be a spike type thing. There'll be places where you can place spikes. So these will kind of be fortifications, actually. So let me actually move these down to fortifications. Ignore the fact that I probably misspelled that. So there'll be ability to put fortifications in. So you have like spikes, sandbags. And what these will do is these will act as ways to slow down the progression of a lane. They will not block the lane, so I'll never let the game block the lanes. But you'll be able to slow the lanes down. So a sandbag, infantry will struggle to get through, but a tank will roll right over. Tank traps. Actually, with the tank traps, the tanks will struggle to get through, but the infantry will pour right through them, and then a heavy tank will roll right over it. Spikes will do damage as stuff rolls through it. It probably won't do any damage to tanks. Roadblocks, everything will slow down on a roadblock. And speaking of roadblocks, you'll be able to make these in-game without purchasing them. So you'll be able to shoot terrain to cause stuff to fall in. You'll be able to do landslides. I want to do a lot of event triggers and stuff like that to make the game more dynamic, kind of like the Battlefield 4, I believe, is the one that had evolution. I think it's, they called it evolution or something. They had some weird name for it, but it was you could blow up the terrain severely and change the entire dynamic of the map. I kind of want to implement a very mild version of that. I don't want to go as far as you can collapse an entire canyon cutting a lane off, but maybe I'll think about it. There may be something we do. Maybe in the campaign I'll let you do that. After all, I am going to try to put a campaign in here. The focus is, of course, going to be multiplayer aspect. It's mainly going to be geared towards 4 people playing together and enjoying the game. But there will be a campaign. It'll still also be multiplayer. So more likely what will happen is I'll build up a multiplayer environment and then just toss a campaign in the multiplayer environment that's like 15 missions that are all run in sequential with each other. Still haven't quite figured that out. I know what I want the GUIs to kind of look like. I know how I want other things to interact with, but I'm trying to decide if I want to put the campaign in its own menu or just toss it up in the multiplayer menu and you just make a lobby and everything else. It feels a little weird. I may put the campaign button still in there, and what the campaign button will do is we'll take you to the hosting menu automatically and then let you host up a lobby. You can decide if you wanted to make it multiplayer or not. That's about it. So, I mean, we got support towers. So you're gonna have a repair and rearm bay. By default, when the lobby probably starts, you're gonna start with a repair and rearm bay, a couple scout towers, an intelligence tower, and a respawn point. And then you can build more of these. So you can build a rearm and repair bay closer to the battlefield. Build a ton of minion towers. So I'm gonna let you spawn your own minions. This will actually play into effect here later, as I plan to build a couple different styles of tower defense. So we're going to have the classic tower defense where enemies spawn at down lanes and they come in and they want to bash your HQ. But then we're going to take a League of Legends style approach to this later, where you'll have lanes where you can send enemies down and then your opponent can send enemies down as well. So you have these lanes you can fight each other, and they'll have their own hero bots and everything else. I'll probably even break it out so you can have a nice multiplayer competition, just like you can have in League of Legends with it down the road. Of course, there'll probably be some arena gameplay. I'll toss a little bit of everything in here because one of the main things I want to do with this game is experiment around with different concepts. So I'm going to focus with the basic tower defense game, as it feels like it'll be kind of cool to have this little PvE environment. Then we might add PvP to the game later. I don't think it'll be that hard. As long as the multiplayer code works well in Unity, we can do a nice 4v4 or 5v5 multiplayer. I may even go all the way out to 20v20 if the code works just that well. I doubt I'll get to that point. 4v4 would probably be the basis, or 3v3. What else we got here? So I already mentioned that turrets will have upgrade paths. You'll have like 3 upgrade paths, so there won't be linear in nature. This will give you a little bit more of diversity, especially with the ammo types. You can pick different ammo types. Like I want AP rounds to pen heavy tanks, HE rounds to AoE the small stuff, flak rounds to hit make it AoE but kind of still have a little bit of penetration power. After all, fragments will penetrate better than just a concussion wave. These will also be good used against flying units. When it comes to flying units, by the way, I'm not sure if I want to have them ignore lanes. They may just be hover above the lane and they'll just have a little bit of height advantage on you. There'll be B rounds. This will be a specialized round. It will act like a shotgun shell, but it's like flechettes, so you have these little nice barbs. They look like needles. They'll be great for killing light vehicles. Ball bearing rounds, which will basically be your normal shotgun shells. They'll also be great against light vehicles, but they'll still do damage against medium and heavy vehicles pretty well. And they'll give you that nice AoE spread, so you can hit a lot of units at the same time. There'll be things like autoloaders, so you can increase your rate of fire. Autoloaders will not be compatible with things like twin and triple, though. So if you want to have double barrels, you can't autoload it. It won't happen. There'll probably be minigun barrels here, too. Should we do that? Gatling gun. This will be Mech Warrior inspired. Mech Warrior has this triple-barreled Gatling gun you can get for the Inner Spear mechs. They also have a version of it for, I think, the clan mechs, but it's burst fire, which will be the chain loader, will be the burst fire system. We'll have a ton of other stuff here. There's a lot of details I still haven't filled out, because I mean, I got this idea, I think, somewhere around Tuesday, and I've been slowly exploring the concept with it, and I'll be working with Grogger and Shadow a lot more. So both Grogger and Shadow are going to be helping me design maps. Grogger will help me design mechanics as well. Shadow is probably just going to be maps, because he's not all into the tank games. We've been trying to get him to play tank games for a long time. Every time we get him to play, he's the type of guy that will pick a tank destroyer and then doesn't understand how to play the tank destroyer. It's not his fault. I mean, it's not his type of game. He enjoys building games. He enjoys thinking games, like playing RimWorld and stuff like that. What else we got to cover here? That's pretty much it. I mean, there's going to be tons of enemies. The enemies are going to be themed If you ever, any of you ever see my Artilix mod where I had those robots, that's what it's going to handle as. I think I have some pictures of that still left. I cleaned out my Dropbox here a while ago to save on space, so I may not have as many here anymore. But I think I do still have some pictures. That being said, I didn't delete the pictures. I just moved them to an exterior drive that I don't feel like accessing right now. So let's see. I think it's projects, and here we go. So we'll have a lot of robots that'll be themed after these like small little guys here with lasers and stuff. You'll have so that's not a picture there. That's not what I want. You'll have things like this too. So you'll have these formations. This is the eyebot I'm talking about. So if you look at the picture here, the boar guy, this is exactly what I'm talking about. The little cube that would shoot lasers and stuff. And I'd probably reinvent my formation code here that I put into the old, this is like what, 1.2.5 Minecraft, I think is what this version was. It may have been newer. I don't see a version number up at the top left. So I want to say sometime before 1.6.4 is what I'm thinking. Because we have assembly line here. I don't remember when I worked on assembly line. There's Artilix creep in the back. So I don't know, we'll figure it out. There will be tons of enemies we'll come up with. Probably take some inspiration from this stuff too when it comes to building themes. But other than that, that's pretty much it. So I just wanted to share that with you guys of what the game idea I was coming up with, so you guys know what I'm working on other than just modding. I'll be making videos of my progress on it. I'm not going to make a Kickstarter for this right now. What I'll do is I'll get the game almost completely finished to the point where it's playable. And then I'll do a Kickstarter. That way, anytime somebody does a Kickstarter for it, I'll give you guys a free copy of the game. The final price for this game, when I do plan right now, is going to be somewhere between $10 to $20. That means I got to get a lot of content if I want $20. Most likely, I'm going to hit $10. It's going to be pretty low end there. Still not quite sure. Because the thing is, after all, I'm not doing this just for the money. I do need the money to make sure I can pay the bills and stuff, but I don't really care too much for it. If we put it on Steam, of course, you could sell it for as cheap as $5, and I would still end up with like 10 grand at the end of the month. But what else we got to think of here? Still a lot of design work to got to do. Got to do all the GUIs. For the GUIs, it's going to be kind of nice. Although I don't get any pictures for it here. I'll make another video where I show all the designs for the pictures of what the GUIs are going to look like. But you'll have some pretty elegant in-game menus. Some of the overlays, if I can open up my Dropbox here again. I don't know why I closed it in the first place. I actually kept some more pictures as well. By the way, this is what we're thinking. At least what I'm thinking of some of the turrets, like the ridiculous nature of it. This comes from Behemoth Defense Turret. I don't remember what game it comes from. But there is a nice, yeah, right here. Pen Test. This is where I got this from. I was looking up like what other people, because whenever time I come up with a game concept, one of the first things I ever do is I go look to see what other games have already done this. I could not find a game that is purely tank-based tower defense, but there are tons and tons of tower defense games. And you can see a lot of them here. I mean, there's a lot of different various things. So I was looking at this. This is probably not going to take a lot of inspiration from these. After all, I want a lot of World War II themed turrets is what I'm thinking of. But it's nice to have this little thing we can look at to see what other people have done. And there's a lot of sci-fi themed stuff here. I just noticed that. Ridiculous amount of sci-fi themed stuff. But yeah, that would work. And what was I? Oh yeah, overlays. So the in-game GUI is going to be very, very similar to World of Tanks. This has to do with how long I played World of Tanks. I absolutely love the way this worked. So you'll have a little HP thing going down in the bottom left here where you can see how your tank's doing and everything else. You'll have the same reticle in the middle, which will have like HP, your ammo. You'll have a mini map on the side. I'll make the mini map configurable so you can pop it up and down and stuff. And I'll make most of the GUI configurable so you can move it. You'll have an ability bar at the bottom, which will be more reminiscent of League of Legends than it will be of World of Tanks. You'll have your teammate on the top left. Has nothing to do with World of Tanks to put the teammates on the top left. I just think that's a good spot to put it. I want to put maybe an enemy counter on the top here, but I'm thinking enemy counter would be better in the middle here. So you go like, okay, you have like 20 enemies left, and it'll show you a progress bar of the wave, and your HP part of your base. And probably some ammo counters down here at the bottom here, so there'll probably be like ammo selection for your thing. You probably have some turret menus down here, so that way when you're aiming at a turret deployment position, you can kind of configure your turret. And these are going to be static placed turrets, by the way. So with like games like Iron Brigade, you can pick wherever you want to put your turrets at. I like that system, but when it comes to AIs trying to pathfind, it's real easy to exploit that to prevent the AIs from pathfinding properly. I found several exploits in Iron Brigade when I was playing it by myself, where I could significantly reduce the movement capability of like the really large AIs that they had in the game. They have some pretty large AIs in that game. When it comes to the minimap, by the way, it will show a nice overlay of the map, and it will show lanes and stuff. Lanes will not be revealed which ones are active without an intelligence tower, and you can't see enemies without a scout tower. At least that's what I'm thinking right now. We may forego that ability, and what we may do is make it so there's different difficulty modes, where easy difficulty mode will show that information to you, but hard will not, and you'll have to do the scout towers and intelligence towers. Intelligence towers will also tell you what type of enemies are coming down the lane, how powerful, how many enemies are left. It'll also give you information on different things. So with scout towers, if enemies near a scout tower, you'll get feedback on how much HP it has left, what's the best weapon type to use against it, since we will have resistance types where like lightning will be better versus this unit type, but then maybe an incendiary weapon would be better on that type, and just flat out DACA will be good on a different type. Would also show the towers. Towers will be color coded to the player. So if the player picks a certain color, so say he's blue, all of his towers will be blue, but then his buddy's orange, and all his towers will be orange. It doesn't even matter if you upgrade him as well. So if like I come over and upgrade my buddy's turret, then that turret is still going to stay that color. I may add some kind of color merging capability to that, at least some indicator that who has upgraded the turret, because I want to have XP shared between players. So you're going to get like these XP style points, which will be used to both buy your turrets, upgrade your tank, and unlock new weapons and various other things. And I think I'm out of stuff to talk about, really. There'll be a menu for selecting your different tank loadouts, by the way, as well. It's not going to look anything like this. What most likely will happen is you'll have a list of tanks on the left here, and then you'll be able to view your tank on the right. I may add multiple different GUI layouts for that one. I'll experiment with them, and I'll do a usability test. For those who don't know what usability testing is, it's where you come up with a plan to test the software, and you go give a whole bunch of users the software and have them go through the testing plan. That way you can get proper feedback on what works, what doesn't work, what people like. It's not just about opinions, by the way, though, because you record the process of somebody going through the game, and you watch them as like, you go, hey, find the option menu, and you sit there and you watch like, where's the option menu, and on this GUI itself, I can already tell it has a really poor usability on just finding the option menu, because even though I know it's up here in the menu, if I'm looking for convention, my brain is thinking, okay, when I'm looking for an option menu, I'm looking for something that says options or settings and has a gear. A gear is the greatest indication of an option menu, although we'll probably just leave the option menu on the main screen and probably the escape menu in game. There'll be a few other things. Yeah, I got nothing more. I'm pretty much out of steam here, and I think my food is almost done cooking. So I'm going to leave this with you here and be back with more information on the game and different topics. I'll probably start working on the tabletop game some more here, as well, as we're starting to get some decent thing on it. I'm just literally waiting on maps, so I know how to design the maps. And other than that, that game is actually going really, really well. So we'll get working on this one as well, and we'll bounce between the two. So we'll spend like a couple weeks on one, we'll spend a couple weeks on the other, and we'll worm this in between working on the mods. So the mods are still going to be a higher priority, just because those are our first projects we made. Then it's going to go probably the tank game, and then it's going to go the tabletop game. So I'll see you all later.